Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Data Dispatch. Holy Toledo, the tariffs are here, and we see the market absolutely plummeting today, having one of the worst days that we've seen since 2020 during the pandemic era times. We see a major sell-off across not just the Magnificent Seven stocks, which tech stocks really led to the selling pressure. We see across the board. We're going to be talking about what exactly happened today, the market's reaction to the implementation of the tariffs, what the administration and Trump has recently said that we got about 2 hours ago from an update, and where the stocks that we've been tracking, like Palantir, how are they sitting right now? And actually, Palantir is doing surprisingly well with the downward selling pressure that we've seen. So if you're a new or returning viewer, hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos, and of course, not a financial advisor, collecting all the data and dispatching it to you. Now, watch a little bit of this quick clip here talking about Trump saying that every country has actually already called to negotiate these tariffs.
Every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. If we would have asked some of these countries, almost most of these countries, to do us a favor, they would have said no. Now they'll do anything for us. But we have tariffs, they've been set, and it's going to make our country very rich.
But are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you some...
Basically saying, hey, if these countries, that they can come out with a good deal, then America would probably spawn in a less of a harsh tariff or different type of deals that could be negotiated. Regardless, we have a trade war that's occurring across the board. And looking at the broader market here, before we talk about Palantir, we see the S&P 500 down about 4.8, nearly 5% on the day today, and the NASDAQ coming down about 6%. Now, specifically looking at these tariffs right here, entering back into its correction territory. For those of you that don't know, the S&P 500 now down about 10%. Once it hits that 10%, is officially, for the year to date, that correction territory. We are now back in the zone, since this is the biggest day loss since 2020, after unveiling, of course, the sweeping tariffs, raising the risk of this global trade war. Basically, we don't know how these other countries are going to respond. Are they going to be responding with retaliation and not trying to bring more manufacturing to America, which could further limit the advantages of the economy? Or could we see them responding with kind of backing down the tariffs that they are charging, which could bring down those reciprocal tariffs? Now, with the NASDAQ coming down here about 5.97, nearly about 6% down right here, Thursday's move is down to its lowest level since the actual election. And right now, the benchmark sits about 12% from the record that we've seen. So about 12% down from the record high. Some of the big sellers, and before we talk about some of the big movers, a baseline tariff rate also in addition here of 10% on all countries is going to affect on April 5th. So this is on top of Liberation Day, which is what we saw with those reciprocal tariffs being placed. Looking right here at those actual reciprocal tariffs, this is from the official White House account on X. These are the discounted reciprocal tariffs that the administration calls, charging them 50% less compared to the tariffs that these different countries charge us. These tariffs with these high percentages are including currency manipulation, they say here, and trade barriers. So they mark China at 67%, the US now charging them a 34% tariff, 20% to the European Union, and 46% to Vietnam. These are pretty high percentages across the board. Even with both countries either charging us or us charging that country, those are high percentages. So this is definitely a trade war that we're entering in here, and you can definitely see why we're seeing a lot of downward pressure on the economy. With this baseline tariff here, on top of that is bringing more uncertainty, and on Thursday today, the president even acknowledged the market sell-off and likened the implementation of the tariffs, talking about here an operation is like this, is when a patient gets operated on, saying here the markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom. So we'll see what happens with that. However, talking about that, looking at specific percentages, we talked about the NASDAQ, we talked about the S&P 500. Some of the big stocks within the Magnificent Seven, and in total, the Magnificent Seven lost over $1 trillion in market value, about equal to the combined market caps of JP Morgan and Netflix. Looking at that Magnificent Seven here, relinquishes more than that $1 trillion. Collectively, we saw technologies that really was kind of leading the broad and the severe market sell-off that's being experienced even in the after hours right now. Trump's plan here, and what we've seen with the Magnificent Seven market caps, one of the biggest ones was Apple, coming down specifically 9.4%. Also, its worst day since March of 2020. That's back to that pandemic era. And this decline wiped off about $315 billion in the market capitalization, the second largest decline for a single stock on record in terms of market cap. One of the big fears for Apple is the concern of iPhone prices, which is a lot of consumerism. That's a lot of retail for Apple. That could possibly be leading to these big fears right here, of course, with the tariffs. We see Amazon dropping here about 9%, making its biggest one-day decline since 2022. NVIDIA right here, big stock that we've seen with AI, a giant retailer coming down about 7%. And we see Microsoft pulling about 2%. Getting back here, Dan Ives, a well-known analyst, very particularly been talking about Palantir a lot on this channel. He called Trump's tariff plan worse than the worst case scenario in a note to clients, and that he expects countries to quickly be able to make deals to reduce their respective taxes, but warned that the U.S. would face a self-inflicted economic kind of Armageddon here, basically saying that the tariffs stay as originally presented. So expecting these countries to respond. Like I said, we do have the administration, Trump coming out here saying that every country is called to actually negotiate these tariffs. So if things do kind of get backed off in terms of the actual percentages of these tariffs, that's where we could see is the, a dip type situation coming in here, or is this a falling knife situation? Basically, are we going to continue to see dips daily, and we don't know where the bottom is going to be? Going to Palantir, let's talk about that since we talked about that a lot on this channel. Sitting at 83.60 right now, actually down only about 4.4% on the day, and holding right now in the after hours on Robinhood. Palantir is actually doing surprisingly well. We don't have a ton of specific information regarding, just the actual company. We do have some articles talking about some insiders that have sold some stock. That's not a big concern to me. Regardless, though, Palantir is doing a good job of holding support, especially for a stock that's pretty highly valued right now. That is the biggest criticism against Palantir, is that its actual valuation is a little too high. Right now, market cap, where it's sitting at, shy of 200 billion, doing fairly well. Very surprised here. So congrats to all the Palantir holders that aren't being maybe nearly affected as much as some of these other big stocks that are taking a much bigger dip. Some of the other stocks that we talked about, Tempest, down about 7%, holding at 46. Big Bear actually not doing horribly, sitting at about this $3 support zone right here. We'll see what happens tomorrow. AMD coming down under $100 at 93.80, down about 8% today. We've talked about other stocks like Grab, took a decent sell-off at $4.06. SoFi at $10 here, coming down about 14%, really taking a hit. And Tesla coming down only about 5% of the day. Tesla actually doing fairly well compared to some of the other stocks that we've been seeing out there. So nonetheless, where we sit right now, who knows? Who knows what's really going to happen if this is going to continue? One stock I'll really be keeping a close eye on is NVIDIA, because with NVIDIA, they have a very strong support level at that $100 right here. And specifically being one of the top AI stocks, basically the highest AI stock right now, and with a lot of the momentum that we've seen behind NVIDIA over the previous few years regarding artificial intelligence, if this loses, and being a Magnificent Seven stock, if this loses the $100 support zone, that is where I could see this more falling into a lower dip type situation. Investors being concerned across the board on where NVIDIA is going, and unfortunately, NVIDIA does have a heavy weight on the NASDAQ, on the the S&P just due to its market capitalization. Do you guys think this is the worst of the worst, or is there still room to go down? Peace out, take care, and I'll catch you guys later.